What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is part of a series where I focus on a specific director and rank that director's work from worst to best. Done such directors in the past such as Paul Thomas Anderson, Wes Anderson, David Fincher, David Lynch. The list goes on. You guys can check out those directors as well as many more on my director playlist down below. But guys, you clicked on this video, so you know it. This time around I'm focusing on Rob Zombie's movies and ranking them from worst to best. Now, I'm filming this video as of July of 2023. So if he does a movie within the next 5-6 months or whenever this comes out in 2024, this video that is, you'll know why that particular movie wasn't included. But I do want to say this, guys. So he has technically made 9 movies, but here's the thing. One movie in particular, and it's an anime movie called, get this, The Haunted World of El Super Bestio. I couldn't find it. I've been looking for it for the last year or so. I've been hoping that it would go on like a streaming service or anything, but no, and it's not really on physical media. So unfortunately, that movie in particular is going to be omitted from this list. So it will be 8 movies that I'll be ranking, and it'll go from 8 being his worst to 1, and of course my personal opinion. And I will be looking forward to hearing your guys' ranking of his work down below, because I do know that he is a director that no person is going to have the same list in terms of the ranking of his work, because he's just one of those directors that's very divisive. So anyways, guys, enough exposition. Let's get started. Kicking things off with number 8, we have Halloween, 2007 version. So this was something I went into an open mind, and I gotta say, I left with a headache. Halloween 2007 was so headache-inducing that I'll never forget. Instead of writing a review right away, I actually went for like a 30-minute walk. I couldn't believe the headache-inducing, nausea-inducing camera work of this movie. It is just, it's edited to death. It is something that should work because the idea behind it is something that has potential, but the execution is really, really, really bad. I do not like the filmmaking at all. There's pretty much no positives in this movie that I can think of offhand. I really, really did not like this movie, and that is why it's in my 8th place. But yeah, next up at number 7, we have the sequel, Halloween 2, which came out in 2009. And it's not as headache-inducing as the first entry, that's for sure, but it still isn't good. And it still is the same type of situation where potentially good ideas, execution-wise, not so much. I really didn't like the shaky camera work, which is something that, yes, was in the first entry of Rob Zombie's rendition, but it's something that didn't work even more so here. Didn't like the score, didn't like really anything about it, but again, I will say it's slightly better than the first entry, and that's why it's my number 7. Next up, we have number 6, which is the most recent entry, that is The Munsters, which is a Netflix movie, and this is something that it's interesting because of all of his movies, you know, when you think of Rob Zombie's movies, you think, you know, very violent, very vile, and just, you know, very sadistic. But then The Munsters is a PG movie that is geared towards kids, but at the same time also geared towards adults that grew up watching The Munsters. So it's a very interesting concoction, but it's something that unfortunately is a concoction that doesn't work in the slightest. It's not funny at all. It's not creepy at all. It's also, the filmmaking is just really, really not good. It's kind of crazy how this is a movie that it's kind of colorful, but at the same time, you can see all the seams of the filmmaking. Like, it's one of those movies that it's so distracting because you're like, okay, this production design really isn't working. The makeup also is something that's kind of distracting. There's just so many things that are stacked tenfold on why this movie isn't working, for me personally, at least. But I will be curious to hear if you grew up watching The Monsters, if this was something that you liked, because I didn't grow up watching The Monsters. But as it is, Rob Zombie's rendition, wasn't a fan of it, but I do appreciate him going for a more, family-friendly route, which is something that made me excited for the movie, but alas, I didn't like it. And yeah, that is why it's my number 6. Next up, my number 5, we have 31. So 31, I feel like the title itself is something that could be replicated as to how long this movie stood in my mind, which was 31 minutes. I'll never forget watching 31 because it was like one of those things where as soon as it ended, I was like, I need to get on Letterboxd to write down my thoughts right away, because it's a very lifeless movie. I liked it better than the other entries, which is why it is my number 5, but at the same time, there's really nothing that sticks out about it. It's, you know, it's tiresome. It's got that shaky camera work that just doesn't work, mixed in with the rapid fire editing. Characters that you really don't care about. Storytelling, it's just kind of like, But yeah, not a fan of this movie, and it really doesn't stick out, and that's why it is my number 5. Next up, my number 4, we have Three from Hell. So Three from Hell is an interesting premise, and I will say some of the execution is good. But there is also a lot of the execution that's very sloppy. And that's just the thing about Rob Zombie's work. It's very sloppy, and you're either all on board with that sloppy kind of filmmaking style, or it's something that takes you out. And for me, more often than not, it takes me out. And this is definitely a case study in that, where there are some definitely interesting ideas and some characters that, although not really likable, are still fascinating. But overall, the overall plotting, storytelling, character beats, is something that does leave a lot to be desired. But I did like this better than the other entries, and that is why it's my number 4. Next up, my number 3. This was the first Rob Zombie movie I saw, which was The Lords of Salem. This movie was something that I hate saying that I was disappointed by it, but I was. And that's because it starts off so intriguing. There is a layer of mystery to this movie that permeates through the tone. And that's something that I quite enjoyed early on. But then as it progressed, it got more and more lifeless. And by the end, I kind of checked out. And it's a shame because now that I've seen all of his work, except, his animated movie, this being an introduction to Rob Zombie's work is something that did kind of work in my favor, because watching this, I can see that the second half is definitely the Rob Zombie schlock that we're all used to, but the first half is genuinely very interesting, and it's something that I kind of wish that he went all in with and had more of a restraint the way he did with that first half. And that's one of the reasons why it's so high up on this list, because I see the potential in this movie. I do. But the overall execution as a whole is something that made it feel kind of disappointing. And that's why it is my number 3. But still, if this is your number 1, totally get that. I respect that. That's why it's my number 3. Next up, my number 2, we have House of a Thousand Corpses. I know many people probably have this as their number 1. I get that. I liked some of the ideas for this. I did. It does kind of have that feeling of like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, although albeit a very dumbed down version of said film, but it's still something that is enjoyable in kind of like a schlocky kind of way. And I do like some of the filmmaking in this, some of it not so much, but there are some enjoyable feats in this movie that I did like. And the characters, although definitely not likable, there is some intrigue with them, and that's something that did keep me invested overall. But I do feel quite mixed about this movie. It is something that I can't say that like I liked. Like on Letterboxd, I don't have this as a heart. I just have it as like a 2.5 out of 5, because it's one of those things where, again, I felt very mixed about it, which is fine, but that's why it's my number 2. And next up, my number 1, my favorite Rob Zombie movie. My number 1 is The Devil's Rejects. This was one of those movies that, if the first half, again, similar to Lords of Salem, if the first half was able to be fulfilled in the second half, I probably would have said, yeah, this is a really good movie. But as it stands, it's a mixed movie, similar to House of Thousand Corpses, but I like it slightly better. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there is so much effort being put into this movie. You can feel it, and you can definitely feel that this is, in my opinion, Rob Zombie's best attempt at trying to make something that is, yes, hard to watch, but at the same time, something that is, at the same time, very investing early on. And that's something I appreciated. But it is something that also does showcase all of the flaws of his work, as well as, the positives that he has. But, that is my number 1. But yeah, guys, if you're new to the channel, at the end of these videos, I do like to talk briefly about the director and if I'm a fan of theirs or not. And hate saying this, but Rob Zombie, I'm not a fan of his work. I think that too often he goes for shock value instead of genuine tension, or at least he starts off with that, and then it just really ends up being into like shock kind of level. That's fine. I can see why that might work for some people, but I also just find his filmmaking to be nauseating at times. He uses a lot of quick cut editing mixed in with quick cut editing that is matched with extreme close-up shots that's also shaky camera work, and it's just got that grimy look to it that, yeah, it is going for like a 1970s aesthetic, but at the same time it feels more distracting than something that is stylistic. But I see why some people might like Rob Zombie's work. I really do. Like, I know a lot of people that I follow on Letterboxd that really like his work. Can respect that, and I wish that I felt that way, but overall, not a fan of his work. But at the same time, if you like his work, I totally get that and I respect that. But I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on Rob Zombie's movies down below. Do you like his work? Do you not? Let me know either or, as well as your ranking down below. Guys, as always, thank you very much for watching. With the subscription, notification bell, follow me down Letterboxd, and I will catch you guys later.